Thanks, Ceann Comhairle. Minister, this is, in my opinion, a very urgent need to bring clarity to the situation whereby homes which are affected by pyrite were supposed to be exempt from the property tax, but the reality is, because of the mechanism used in order for people to achieve that exemption, it in effect means that they are unable to avail of it. Now, we're talking about people who own homes who are essentially valueless, people who can't sell their property, and I've only tabled this amendment after lengthy correspondence with both the Minister of the Environment, the Minister for Finance, and in fairness, in all of that correspondence, both departments have recognised that there is a serious anomaly here, that people whose houses have pyrite can't avail of their legitimate exemption. And what this amendment is seeking to do is to make that process easier. Sorry, Ceann Comhairle, it's a bit difficult. There's a bit of noise here. Can you just wait for a bit?
I ask members, if you're leaving the House, please do so quietly. Thank you.
And it's in light of the fact that the department has recognised the anomaly that I am pushing this here today. Now, as it stands currently, if you own a property with pyrite which is valueless, in order to get the exemption, you are required to spend thousands of euros to have a hardcore infill test done on that property in order to avail of what will be an exemption of hundreds of euros over a period of 3 years. Now, nobody can possibly stand over that scenario. It's particularly offensive when you consider that the government, in response to pressure from these affected homeowners, set up a pyrite remediation board. And the criteria for houses to be remediated under that state scheme does not require an underground infill hardcore test being carried out. So we have a ridiculous scenario where homes have been approved for remediation under the government scheme for pyrite, but they can't get their property tax exemption because no infill test was done. Now, that is frankly ludicrous, and there's an urgency in addressing it, because at the moment those homeowners are getting letters from Revenue, in some instances forcibly deducting that money from them, and in instances where an exemption has been given, taking that money back off them. And these are people whose backs are to the wall. It's a serious problem. Now, what I am proposing to do is to say, not that anybody can get it just for the sake of it, that a homeowner with pyrite has to show that they have a building condition assessment rating of 2 or 1 plus progression, which means that they have significant damage in their property and either have been approved by the remediation board or be in an area which the remediation board is well aware that pyrite exists. Now, I think those two measures give the state adequate protection but make it easier for people to avail of that. And I'm really curious to see how the Minister could possibly stand over a situation where to save hundreds you have to spend thousands, and that's the way the Act is legislated at the moment. When I raised this in correspondence over the past number of months, I was initially told that the departments were looking at it, that the statutory instrument could be amended, but the last time I asked it, it was said the responsibility was the primary legislation, and that's why I'm pushing this amendment now.
Deputy Daly's amendment and then Deputy McGrath's amendment, taking into account the contributions made by other deputies. I'm aware of the issues that Deputy Daly is attempting to address with her proposed amendment. Officials of my department, with officials of the Department of the Environment, Community and Local Government, have been examining the alternative, other than testing, that may be available in order to confirm entitlement to local property tax exemption, with a view to come up with an early viable solution for all. The Deputy's amendment removes the requirement for subfloor hardcore testing and replaces it with either acceptance by the Pyrite Remediation Board for remediation or location in any area where the presence of pyrite has been established. As I'm sure the Deputy is aware, the Pyrite Remediation Board's Pyrite Resolution Scheme is limited to properties with a damage condition rating of 2, and this requirement would therefore be of no use to a property with a damage condition rating of 1 with progression. As the Pyrite Remediation Board's Pyrite Resolution Scheme is a scheme of last resort, It would also be of no use to properties being remediated through other avenues, for example, through insurance or directly by builders. It is important that any changes that may be made to the LPT legislation do not go beyond the objective of providing a temporary exemption for homes with significant pyritic damage. As I have advised on many occasions in the past, the liability for LPT should apply to all owners of residential property with a limited number of exemptions. Limiting the exemptions available allows the rate to be kept low for those liable persons who do not qualify for an exemption. The other option proposed by the Deputy, that is location in any area where the presence of pyrite has been established, does not in itself establish the presence of pyrite in any particular property. In this regard, I believe the Deputy's proposal is too broad and could result in the relief being available to those beyond the intended target group. LPT operates on a self-assessment basis, and it is a matter for the property owner in the first instance to calculate the tax due based on his or her assessment of the market value of the property. Where a property owner does not qualify for an exemption, when making an assessment, issues such as the presence of pyrite in a particular area will be one of the factors that could be taken into account in valuing their property. So I'm not accepting the Deputy's amendment, though I hope that the issues she has raised can be resolved outside the bill. In relation to the amendment as a whole, I can confirm that while I'm not accepting the amendment, officials are and will continue to examine how the issue, which is problematic, can be dealt with. And we'll continue in discussion with the Department of the Environment to see if we can come up with an appropriate solution.
Thanks, Concórla. Minister, your reply seemed to suggest that you are worried that my amendment might have the result of allowing too many people to avail of the exemption, that it was in some way too broad. But I'd take a step back to the origin of that exemption in the first place was for those homeowners whose property had pyrite, whose property was dangerous, whose property was unsaleable and basically valueless, that they would not be taxed for something that was in essence a liability. And I would remind you that at the time when the exemption was introduced, government backbenchers in the relevant constituencies went around and told residents, we've got you this exemption here now, you don't have to worry about the property tax. So that is all we're looking for here, is that homes that are affected can avail of the exemption that was intended for them in the first place. And what we're talking about is properties that are damaged and properties that are to a certain level of damage, not two, but one with progression, because Deputy Wallace is quite correct that that means the property is valueless as well, and in an area where everybody knows that there is pyrite. In essence, if it looks like a dog, it barks like a dog, chances are it's a dog. And that's the interpretation that the Pyrite Remediation Board has taken. If the house is damaged, it's in an area with pyrite, well then they're accepting that that has pyrite for the purposes of remediation. Well then surely to God the same criteria would apply for the purposes of exemption to the property tax. It's not much comfort to people whose homes have been damaged to the tune of which the remediation is going to cost tens of thousands of euros. We're only talking about an exemption that will benefit them tops maybe $1,000 over the course of the 3 years that it will apply. Now I note the point that the Minister has made, that his department along with the Department of the Environment recognise that there is a problem and you are looking at alternatives. My problem is that that's the response I got from you 6 months ago, and I don't in any way mean that in a disrespectful or a flippant way, but I mean it very much in the context of the homeowners who are getting letters from Revenue at the moment and who are looking at saying, how long does it take them to sort these things out? It really isn't that difficult. Could they not come up with a criteria? And the criteria I've outlined isn't quite as you outlined it, Minister. What I'm saying is that if the property has carried out a BCA rating which shows damage of 2 or 1 and has either, my last 30 seconds, has either been accepted by the board or is in an area where pyrite is